when we find ways to coexist in these pressure cooker environments where we're helping everybody identify and meet their needs in ways that don't involve constant fighting and conflict and all of that, that it helps in this moment now. And it's the kind of stuff you and I have been working with families for years on, which is how to do that all the time. But in this pressure cooker environment, it can be such a great opportunity to iterate quickly through new ways of behaving with each other, because we're all resetting our autopilots right now, or we have to, otherwise it's misery, right? So you and I had talked about sharing a little bit about what we're seeing in a video series, a short video series, to see if that might be helpful for folks and how to rethink that. And really based on shifting to operating on the principles of self-directed education. And as we've talked about before, there's a number of underlying things that inform self-directed education that people might have heard of before, like nonviolent communication, restorative practices, positive parenting, and just other ways of relating that are really, as I think about them, just ways of relating in an equitable, co-creative fashion and a power with fashion instead of a power over and domination-based paradigm. So great time to shift the paradigm. What would you say, you want to talk a little bit more about what that paradigm shift is and why it's so helpful for us and our kids. And then we'll talk a little bit more about this series itself that we're going to be doing and how people might want to use it.
Yeah, and I think everyone has their own favorite term for what these things are, or favorite terms. The most recent one I've kind of become attached to is partnership parenting, because it really illustrates how your relationship with your kid, instead of being power over or control, or even like what we're used to the word parenting to mean, like we have to tell them what to do and make sure they do it. I think in a lot of senses is what we think the word parenting means. But you're shifting that, because your relationship with your kid is a partnership, just like your relationship with your husband or wife or partner or friend. So if you reframe it in those terms, I think that really helps. And
I
think
like that descriptor.
Yeah, I think all those other terms help too, but that's the one that in 2 words kind of like hits home for me.
Perfect.
And the other thing about this moment, and I heard someone bring this up the other day, but it's that a lot of these problems that we're experiencing, both in society and in the home, were actually already here. So some things are new. Some stressors are brand new, like not being able to go to the grocery store as often or as easily as you'd like. Like that's new. But a lot of the things we're experiencing are just problems that were already here, but really, really heightened. And in this moment, when things are really heightened, that makes them more obvious. And while it can be harder to address something when you're in this heightened state of stress, it's also a chance to notice what's really happening and what's underlying, and then work really hard on those things to kind of shift them. Because your relationship with your kid will always be here, whether it's under extreme stress or under a little bit of stress or not under stress. But being with them all the time or more of the time, you can actually see those dynamics easier, dynamics that were probably already there, and kind of pick out what's happening and then try and shift it in a more, maybe even like a quicker way than before, because we're with each other all the time. It kind of has to be more quick.
I think that's a really important point, Bria, that it's not that we need to spend a bunch of time learning to deal with something that's only going to be here for a little while, and then this like won't, it's not wasted effort. Those things were there before. This is heightening them, and it's a heightened opportunity to change them because we can iterate faster. We're just in it. It's like we've talked about this before. It's learning a language, and you learn languages through immersion. And so we have an opportunity to learn this language now in an immersive environment that we may never otherwise have had. So that's a great point. Will you say a little bit more about the partnership parenting? So how is that different from the domination-based or kind of power over parenting that most of us grew up with and have used as the dominant paradigm in society? And what benefits does that bring for us and our kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts from a really simple place for me, and that's that children are people too, and they actually know their needs and wants better than we do. And I think that's a really simple place, but that's actually really hard for adults because we've come from this paradigm of adults know best, and here's all the reasons why. Um, we are older, we have lived more life a lot of the time. So those things come into play in terms of like maybe advice you want to share, but that doesn't mean that adults have the right to tell kids what they need to do. It just means we have the right to share our ideas with them, just like we would in any partnership, and then see if they want to take them or not. um, so just coming from this place of children are people and they have the right to decide for themselves, just like any human being. That's the place where I start. And that sounds really simple, but it becomes really complicated when we really delve into some of these topics like structure and screen time and chores or family responsibilities and all that. And we'll get into that more in detail later. But really, the shift I think you can expect to see and that I've seen is that your kids want to work in partnership with you. So suddenly, all those things that seemed like a struggle or they were complaining about, or it seemed like they weren't on your team, now they are on their team. So if you are on your team, you're on the same team. So if you respect their needs, that's going to come back to you. Um, if you respect when they're wanting to do a certain thing or when they're saying no to you, especially, that means when you have something you need, like just a minute ago, Aaron and I were trying to figure out how to clear our families out of rooms so we can do this without sound interruption. They really respect that because they know it's something you really need, and they know you're going to respect them when there's something they really need.
Yeah, that's, I think, a good description of that, Bria. And a couple things we've talked about before, again, and just laying this foundation of what are we talking about here exactly? What is this difference? One is that, a lot of experience with that adults have with kids so far is that if adults don't control the kids, then things go crazy. Like, and when we say, hey, start listening to kids' needs, and then adults say, well, they'll say their needs are to eat Twinkies all day and play video games all day. And, part of the response that we see from kids, both in what they choose to do, how they choose to spend their time, how they choose to relate, is partly in response to the control that we use over them. And so when we picture taking that control away, like if we did for a day, maybe they would eat Twinkies all day and play video games all day, but eventually and in strong partnership and talking with them about, hey, what do you want for yourself? And here's things I'm concerned about, and maybe what you're doing, that eventually they actually do start to take responsibility, because before we actually took that responsibility away from them and didn't allow them to practice it. And a lot of their resistance to what we want is simply payback from the deep dignity center of their being for the unfairness of us constantly controlling their lives. So you and I have both seen in our own families and in families that we work with that when you begin to work towards a place of equity and fairness and respect, that all of that, no, I don't want to do it, it's not my turn, or blah, all that stuff just really has a big shift once kids really begin to feel that there's fairness in the ecosystem of our relationship. So it's not often instant, but it is huge when that shift happens and they truly believe that we do hold their needs as valuable and that we trust them to have some understanding of what they are. But just like in any partnership, again, if any of us, if my wife said, hey, I'm going to just eat sugar all day, I might say, hey, I really wonder what's going on for you, that big shift is happening. What do you think about what that might have on your, right? Like we engage, we don't just immediately go, no, bad idea, you're wrong, do this, and then think that we've taught them a lesson because we forced them with threats to not eat ice cream. So we're talking about partnership parenting. We're talking about all of the things that inform that. And I love that term. we have talked with lots of parents and really found that there's a number of things, a small handful that are like the hot issues with families, homebound parents and families right now, which is how do we come up with structures in our homes, time structures, sharing structures, responsibility structures, ways that we talk to each other to identify and meet our needs. I think of those as structures too, in a way. Like, how do we come up with those structures that support us in ways that aren't just, hey, these are the parents' ideas of what that is, you kids do it or else, right? So structures is a big one, routines, all that stuff. Chores is another hot topic for families in a kind of a high pressure area. Screen time is just heightened right now for everybody. We all have feelings about that. It is a little bit addictive. We all are drawn towards it and probably use it too much, but how do we deal with that with each other, with our kids? And then what we've been calling learning, but as you and I preach whenever we can, we're never not learning, right? But I guess I mean what most people would think of as learning, like if kids are still in a school or doing Zoom classes or whatever, or they have homework packets, or even if you were homeschooling and had some things that you were doing as a family, just that's a stressful area for a lot of families. We feel like there's kind of conflict around that. Parents think it should be happening and they're pushing for it, and the kids don't feel that's the thing they want to be doing right now, and so there's some tension around that. So those are really the 4 areas that we have heard a lot about from people, and have worked with people on quite a bit recently. And so this series will have a video for each of those, where we'll talk about those and how to use this partnership parenting approach to deal with those and make shifts that help us now and shifts that will last for the rest of our lives in relating with our kids. And by the way, everybody who we do this work with says that even though we're talking about our relationships with our kids, everybody reports that it helps them in their own relationships with other adults and even in the workplace. So this is an investment of your time that the testimonials from our work with families is just over the moon with how much people say that this, just making this shift helps them. And that reflects what it did for me and my family when we made this shift. It was night and day. So everybody, hope that this series will be helpful for you. Hope that this intro is also helpful. Again, you don't have to fully understand what partnership parenting is at this point. We're going to continually talk about what it is through specific examples. How do you create structures in your family through a partnership? And co-creative approach is a word that I will often use with that. And then chores, with screen time, with learning. How do you do that in a partnership manner that feels good to everybody and gets everybody better results? So Bria, yeah, I'm excited to do this together and make this available for folks. And we will jump into the structure video shortly and have that available as well, right? Anything else to add for folks to help them understand the value of checking out that next video?
No, I think your explanation speaks for itself, and we'll dive deeper into these examples. So if you kind of have an idea about this but aren't sure what exactly it means or what it looks like, please check out our next videos, because we're going to dive into specific examples that I think will really help illustrate it for you, and like remind you of what's coming up in your home too.
Great. So check out the next video on structure and how to set up structures in your household with your family in a partnership co-creative approach. As I guess the kids say, subscribe below and you'll see the videos. Yeah. And I'll see you in the structure video. Bye, everybody. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. Tune in to the next one where we talk about structures and how to build them together in ways that serve everybody's needs without constant conflict.